and welcome to the second of this year's EuroVersy postmortems after this year's Eurovision Song Contest held here in Liverpool. The big five, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and Italy, the five countries who get to go direct to the grand final of the Eurovision on the basis that they put the most money into it. It's fair to say their performances have been variable over the course of the past few years, and there's no difference to that this year, with Italy coming a commendable 4th, but France coming in 16th, Spain in 17th, the UK down in 25th, and Germany in 26th and last place. So this week, we're going to talk about the big five. What's gone wrong? How can they make it better for themselves? Should we have a big five? And so on and so on. So first of all, let's talk about just the idea of the big five. In general, how do we think they got on this year?
I think
not the worst.
No, but I don't think any hit expectations going in. I mean, bar Meg, who probably would say Italy was right bang where Marco Mengoni deserved to be. None of the other four did as well as I think any of us expected. I think we all expected this to be a big turnaround for the big five, and there was potential for all five songs, but Marco was as typical of Italy, was the only one that was leagues above the rest. And I think if we said back in March only one will be in the top, in the left hand side of the scoreboard, I think we'd be quite shocked.
Yeah, I think if I remember from before the contest, everyone seemed to like France, everyone seemed to like Spain by and large. Positivity for the UK entry was positivity for the UK entry was riding high. Yeah, so and then they just didn't do as well as they thought. So what we'll do is we'll go through them sort of essentially country by country, and we'll go in in order of who did best first. So let's start with Italy. Italy came 4th with Marco, and what went well for Italy? Well, obviously they came 4th, but why do you think they did as well as they did?
Italy is, I'd say, the most consistently quality entrant of the Eurovision Song Contest at this moment, because they are using Sanremo as their, well, not actually as their national final, but they tend to go with the winning song and winning act from Sanremo. And that is a brilliant choice because Sanremo is in a very healthy state. It is a very good pop contest, and they never go for Eurovision sensibilities. They go for whatever works in Italy. And the Italian market is extremely competitive and extremely strong, and they're making so much good music. So the risk that Italy would send off something that would be completely, useless is slim, I'd say.
I think you don't enter Sanremo with a bad song, so it's really hard for them to go wrong. So as long as they're keeping on doing what they're doing, Italy are going to keep on being consistent. And I think what's great about their songs as well is they always get the storytelling right, even though most people won't speak the language. I think that's what really got Marco that good result this year, is just it was a quality song, performed well, and we all got it. So it wasn't a shock for me personally, seeing him do, maybe I wouldn't have said top 5, but I knew it was going to come top 10. So
yeah. I was going to say, so I have I know someone who's works for press for ITV. It's weird. So he was sent by ITV to Eurovision, but he's not a massive Eurovision fan, but he saw the jury show the night before the final. And me and my friend asked him, like, oh, who do you think stands out? And we thought he was going to say Spain, France. And he said, no, Italy. He said Italy was his number one. And that's from someone who isn't a massive Eurovision fan, who didn't really keep up with it. And I do tend to find that a handsome guy singing a ballad, like quite a strong emotional ballad, usually more times than not does really well. I didn't expect it to get top 5. I thought it would get top 10 at best, but I think the running order helped it as well. It came right after Albania, and I thought it would suffer potentially next to Estonia, but it didn't. I think it got the handsome vote. He's the full package, and it was a pretty safe entry. And in hindsight, I can see why it did so well.
I think for me, the part that didn't work about Italy was the performance behind him, which I didn't find added anything to it, because with or without that, he was still going to be able to do what he could do. So that was the only part that I didn't really think connected. Right? And of course, it was about two lives, and the whole thing was meant to be as it was. But I didn't think that was as necessary as maybe they might have thought it was for the contest and for the stage. But aside, yeah, it was a terrific entry.
I think Meg and I.
Sorry, the thing I'm finding interesting is nobody's saying they really, really like the song. They're all just saying it's safe, and Sanremo is a safe set of hands. I think, I mean, you can't argue with results, but do you not think it's somewhat boring and predictable? Italy sends a man singing a ballad. Other than obviously Måneskin, it seems to always be the way. Italy sends a bloke singing a ballad.
But it works. That's the thing. It's from that. I mean, because I think I was talking to Meg. We were talking about it in a coffee shop in Liverpool when we spoke about Italy. I said, like, no one's talking about this, but from a jury perspective, or like you're trying to take marks off, it's hard to mark down to Evite. No one's talking about it in the fandom, but it's a very polished song, which we know will be sung well. So it's hard to criticize and not put it high. It comes down to a preference, and that's why, like in the jury vote, he got a lot of like 10s and 8s. Because although it wasn't the best or a big standout, it was still a very clean performance. And it's a bit like Sweden. They'll always send something polished to a degree. So it's hard to reject that. And then also with the public, it does help they sing in Italian. The Italian language is very beautiful. And I often do question, because I don't always love Italy's entries. I'm like, is this good? Or is it because they're singing in Italian, people love it? I've always had that sort of like internal fight with myself, like with Brividi. Is this a good song or is it the Italian language? But it works. And I understand it's a bit dull and the same theory. And we criticize Sweden for this, and Malta always sending a female, for example. But if it's working for them, I can see why they're not deviating. However, I would like to see someone like LOD, Madame, or someone like that going in the next few years, because they're all stunning singers and they would do just as well. Just not Emma Morone crawling around on the stage again. That's where they went wrong in 2014, because that you say they very rarely miss, but that was a big miss.
And a year after that miss, they went back heavily into using Sanremo. One of the things I found about Sanremo this year is it felt very much like it was one for the Italian music industry and not for people outside of Italy, which, given they'd had the focus on international and winning Eurovision the 3 or 4 years before that, I think that was understandable. So I think every single song in Sanremo was utterly safe this year. None of them stood out for me. But the thing is, the base level of Italian music isn't 6 out of 10, it's 7.5 out of 10, which means even at their sort of base, standard, boring, straight ahead ballad, it's not up there with Diodato, it's not up there with Brividi, it's not up there with Soldi, it's definitely not right up there with the one that I can never get the pronunciation right on, Non mi felomante. Yeah, that one. It was still strong. As for the staging at the back, I think, Elliot, you'll agree with me, Johan Bourgeois did it far, far better with the trampolining and Debussy. But yeah, it didn't need that. But I can see why they thought maybe we should do something in the background. I think that's a broadcaster just lacking a bit of confidence. But the one thing I want to say about Italy, more than anything, is there was one moment, I think, at Eurovision where Marco just managed to change lives. And that's when he brought out the pride flag in the flag ceremony. And if anybody was watching beforehand, that flag was hidden really tightly. It was inside an Italian flag. It was, I'm not showing this. This is a decision of Marco to show his support and his alliance. And, for an Italian male to wave a pride flag on international television, there will have been people watching that and went, you know what, I'm not alone. And I'm now going to be very emotional and heartfelt, but I think that he will have changed for the better so many Italian lives in the LGBTQI community who felt alone, and they wouldn't have felt alone at that point. So it doesn't matter where he's finished. I think that Marco has made a huge mark on Italy and Italian society just by turning up. And then he turns up with a song called Two Lives, and it's not even subtle. Thank you for being an ally.
Absolutely. Just going back to the staging thing, I was in the audience for the jury final, so I was sat side on to what was going on. And Will, you talk about connection. I mean, the physical connection just wasn't there at all. I mean, I literally had to be like watching him sing and then sort of go, oh look, there's some men on trampolines. Like it was a real, you couldn't take, my eyes couldn't take in both things. So I think it was, and then if I watched them, because like, that's quite cool. I'd be like, what's going on over there? It was really, I mean, obviously the TV didn't see that, but in the arena, that's what I picked up on.
Yeah, I was there that night as well. The exact same. I was on a side-on view, and they weren't getting my attention. I was just looking at him on the front stage, and that was it. Yeah, so it was a TV decision, but it wasn't really necessary in the end.
But they even lit that fantastically. It was hard, even on the broadcast. They're hard to see, and no one knows how to use them. It's like BB Thomas back in Germany had them as well in the national final, and you hardly saw it. So although it's a cool concept having those trampolining things, broadcasters don't know how to use that, because like I said, it was very subtle that you saw it because the back lighting was so dark. It was almost like just like a silhouette thing. So it's like almost like a last minute decision. Do I think it impacted the result? No. Did it need it? No, but I think they thought we can't send him out there in a chandelier top with no staging. Yeah, sorry, I really did not like that shirt vest he was wearing. I thought it was hideous, and I stand by it.
that was done in Versace.
I don't care. It wasn't nice.
I'm pretty sure I've seen somebody on a Graham Norton show using that sort of stairs, pink, and I'm pretty sure she was on the stairs with people doing it, which I think would have been how I would have staged it.
I think that was too much on Graham Norton show. I think it wouldn't have. So it certainly wouldn't have fit Marco. There's no way he should run up the stairs and do what he did. But I don't know. I think it has to be a very different sort of song to get away with it like that. And if it takes over too much, it can just completely distract from the song. So I think the best part of that whole performance actually, it sounded like can be rude about it, but it was the end. Well, when he's kind of like fell onto the ground almost, sort of exhausted, and he sort of showed how much he'd put into it, and there was quite a human moment at the end. I think it wasn't planned, but it was a really nice.
I think he just got caught up in the whole emotion. I think of the whole performance, and I think that's what Italy tend to do quite well as well, is like actually getting that emotion across to the audience as well. I think that's a really big thing, I think, and sort of drives a lot of their votes as well.
It was a nice sort of circle moment for him as well. I was a huge fan of his song in 2013. It's one of my favourite songs ever. But that performance in Malmo was not Marco Mengoni quality, at least not for now. So it's really nice to see him come back and see his growth as well as an artist, and see what he's actually capable of, and actually is capable of getting the result that he probably should have got for L'Essenziale if it had been performed, more comfortably, I think, on the night.
With L'Essenziale, I watched it recently. He looks like he's worried he's left the oven on.
He's just not present, is he? It's not. It's a beautiful song, and
I think one of the problems. I think one of the problems with L'Essenziale was the jury performance, and those who've seen the jury performance will know that he did not endear himself to the jury at all. But that was 10 years ago. I mean, and people, he has grown so much in those last 10 years, and you can see that on stage. He knows the stagecraft. He knows how to look down the camera and look like, if you're a nan, oh, he's a lovely lad. And if you're slightly younger, you're thinking, that's a lovely lad. He knows how to sing an Italian male ballad. He has a career out of it. He's got record-breaking discs of various colors going on in the background. I can't remember who just said the fact that he's matured in the performance, Meg. I think it was yourself. It is. You can see it. And that's kind of what Sanremo does over a week. If you want to win Sanremo, you've got to have the endurance, the stamina, the performance, and the capability to do this 5 nights, 6 nights in a row, because you have the press night on the Monday night as well. Sanremo's such a machine. If it doesn't break you, you're automatically going to be far better at Eurovision because of it, because you have to do press over 6 days, not 6 weeks at Melfest, or not at all if you're an internal selection. We talk about Sanremo as not being a Eurovision thing, and we're right. But at the same time, it is the perfect physical training ground for what happens in the whole city. And that will never change. And that's why over the next couple of years, I think Italy is still going to say that quite a high watermark. And certainly Amadeus, as the creative director, next year will be its last year. So I think if Italy is going to slip up, it's not going to be until 2026 at the earliest.
I have to add, I'm actually really surprised to hear how many of you thought that, you know, he did well, but the song was dull, and that's the impression I got, that fandom thought in general. That I keep getting this feeling that fans in general have put this tag on Italy now, a little bit like on Sweden, that the initial reaction, the knee-jerk reaction is, I'm not going to enjoy this for whatever reason. And it's so difficult for me to see that, because I thought that Due Vita was a stunning song from the moment I heard it. And I was so happy that they managed to make the brief Eurovision version without butchering it. I thought that was really nice as a change. Yeah, I know that I am. One thought that I've been toying with for Italy, one thing that they could possibly consider is that if they want to do really well at Eurovision, would they have that as a special prize in Sanremo, to have a special jury pick the best song for Eurovision instead of going with the overall winner? That could be something they could experiment, but I wouldn't encourage it, because why wouldn't Italy want the Sanremo winner at Eurovision and get the added PR that brings? So I don't think they need to tamper with it at all. I think they're doing extremely well. Every now and then they are going to end up with a winner that won't fit the Eurovision concepts, because it can't be shortened in a graceful way, or it's the kind of singer who only focuses on Italy and won't bother with Eurovision. You know, that can happen and that will happen. But I think that Italy doesn't need to tweak anything, really.
Just before we move, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think Sanremo is a very, very well-oiled machine. And I think the results, I saw a graph of how many top 10s they've had over the past decade. It's immense. It's insane. My only gripe is, I just want more women to win. And I know there's nothing we could do about that, but there is a very big lack of women. Like 2060 Francesca. I can't remember how you pronounce her name. I don't think she even won Sanremo. As far as I'm aware. Yeah, I just think we need. Yeah, I just think it would be nice to see a woman again, but I don't know how to battle that. But I know a lot of Italians who do say that it's a prominent issue. The bias towards men, and I hope one day that will be resolved, because I'd love to see a woman represent them again.
Sanremo Sausage Festival.
I don't have that many like in Sanremo for starters, not 50-50 by any means. Like maybe a quarter.
Sorry, is that in terms of the votes you were asking there, Mark?
Actually, the actual numbers of women taking part in Sanremo.
Let me have a little look.
How many was it this year? It certainly wasn't anywhere near.
There were no women.
It depends very much on the year, of course. Yeah, it depends on the year. Actually, Marco Mengoni did address this in his winning speech when he won. He actually brought it up on live television that he's very happy that he won, but it's a big shame for Italy that none of the women made it to the super final even. And I thought that was also a very brave thing to do, you know, to get chosen as a winner. And the first thing you say is that, well, thanks, but, you know, you're voting like monkeys, you know.
We think there's going to be a push for Amadeus to try to get like a big name female in for next year. Because we kind of already knew that Marco was going to win.
Yeah.
Is there someone that Amadeus can say, right, you're going to win this year?
Yeah, but in terms of bringing in a big Italian female, anyone who appears at Sanremo is a big artist. I mean, this year, look, I'm just going to flip down. Obviously, Madame's an up-and-coming name, and if I had to have a magic wand, Madame next year for Eurovision, please. But yeah, they went all the way from sort of beginner with Madame. You went right back to Paolo Chiara, who managed to do the only Schlager song, I think, out of the national selections that night, even up against Melody Festival. And, you know, Tanani's in there. There are lots of big names at Sanremo, and it will continue to attract big names. I think the biggest problem with Sanremo is that it allows the press room to vote. And I mean that is a big problem because the press room composition is a much bigger sausage factory than even the guest star list. So it is a matter of representation in every single area because you have the press room voting, you have a demoscopic jury voting, you have the public voting. And I don't think that there's an easy answer for RAI. I don't think there's an easy answer for SVT with it in Melody Festival. And I don't think there is an easy answer for that anywhere across the board. The demographics of who's voting in the national finals, which is a topic I'll bring up with Germany, I think is just naturally tending towards the male artist, which makes it much harder for a female artist. I mean, there wasn't a single female artist. Meg, Faye, I think you can back me up here. I don't think there was a single female artist in the top 5 runoff at Sanremo this year.
There was none in the top 5. Yeah.
No.
And they
in
deserved
the
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a systemic problem across all of Eurovision and across all of national finals and across all the pop music. But we, as a contest, maybe we should be better than that.
Mm.
And this is the thing with Sanremo, it is actually can be quite diverse. I mean, it's so diverse. I mean, I'm thinking of, was it maybe last year before, when we had I can't think of the name of the band in the top of my head, but it was like Kimika, for example. I can't remember who's singing that song.
Oh yes,
but that was absolute
wonderful
bop. You know, so that's what I think. That's the whole thing I love about the charm of Sanremo is that whole diversity and the whole. I think we had a lot more queer representation. If maybe last year when was it the year of Achille Lauro when he was in Sanremo. The years escape me, but you know there was a lot more. I think queer representation. Hopefully, now we have Marco. I'm hoping that queer representation might sort of like cascade into 2024. So,
okay, let's move on to. We're just for Sam's benefit. We're just going down in order of how well everyone did. So the next one is France, who came 16th for Lazada and Évidemment. I really like this. I thought it was going to do better. I seem to put the kiss of death on things that if anyone stood next to me in a photo during Eurovision week basically didn't qualify or did really badly. And unfortunately, Lazara did stand next to me for a few seconds in the Camp and Furnace. So yeah, well, so a sort of mid-table result for a country who expected to do much better this year. What went wrong?
Staging. It's France's issue. They can't stage a song, and I'm going to bring up every year France has been a contender. So we got 2016 with Amir. Sixth is still a good result for France, but he was expected to win it. The staging was weak. Alma, again, a mid-table result because the staging was a bit nothing. Mercy, a contender to win or at least be top 5. The staging was a bit void, and you get the message. I cannot think of why she is in a giant disco dress on a plinth with the French flag going behind her during the big moment. Like, we get it, you're from France, you've got a giant beret on, you look stunning, you know, you're as French as can be with the song, and then you've got the French flag and the LEDs behind. It's just, and at that point, I did, as much as I love Lazada and Évidemment, I did roll my eyes like, this is overkill. This is complete overkill of trying to hammer down a point. And I think that's France's issue. And they are so proud of their, you know, music scene and their language, and more power to them. But they never know really when to stop. I think they just need someone just to like throw everything at it, and then an editor just like, right, let's cut that, let's drop that. We don't need to put her on a giant plinth that goes up and down 5 feet. She doesn't need to have 5 feet of, you know, sparkly organza as well attached to the dress. We don't need to put her in a giant beret because we know she's French. She's representing France, for Christ's sake. Like, they just need to edit their performance. I think that's the only thing that's stopping a French win is their performance, because the songs are there. We've seen that the last 6 to 7 years. The songs are not the issue. It's the on-stage performance. And I think that's what turned a lot of people off, was the 3 minutes on stage. Lazara sang perfectly. It's everything around her, sadly.
I think they did hold themselves back, Ellie, actually, because that dress, when you look at it on the tower, was the exact proportions and the exact shape to have the Eiffel Tower projected on it as well. So I think maybe we got saved from the absolute ultimate overload of France. But I'm just looking back at all those staging things, and Barbara Pravi, 1 pin spot, 1 steady cam, sung second. France's problem is they didn't select Barbara Pravi again, who's had a hand in the last couple of Junior Eurovision songs for France, the last couple of Eurovision songs themselves. She got how to be French without being overpowering. And my big problem with this French song is that it didn't pick a lane. If it wanted to be disco, be disco. If it wanted to be chanson, be chanson. People looking at that for the very first time, which is 95% of the voting public, didn't know what they were watching. They got themselves all nice and settled into this chanson number of French, and you're standing on top of, maybe that's the Eiffel Tower. And then it suddenly changed gears. And we've had countless listens. Juries listened to the songs multiple times as well. And we get what they were trying to do there. On first listen, there was this massive of musical gears being crunched. And I think that's where it fell down. It fell down right at the end of, you've made a great song, but you've not made a great competitive song.
I
was
going to say, so I think the thing with France is that I think everything just kind of fell short. I remembered when there was a press release, it was just before rehearsal. No, it was when rehearsals were going on, and they released a description of her performance, and there were some photos as well. And I remembered the reaction. People were like, oh my God, this could win. And I think that was then she shot up in the odds because the photography looked beautiful. I think there was one performance, I don't know if it was the jury or the live show, her vocals were a bit shaky. They weren't 100% perfect. I think especially the big note. And I think also her running order wasn't great. Unfortunately, a lot of the big hitters did draw the first half. And I know it doesn't really matter as much for the juries. I don't think the juries care about running order as much, but the televote, I think she definitely got, there was just so many big songs next to each other and she just got drowned out, because then Cyprus followed her, then Spain, then Sweden. It was quite forgettable. And I just think it was unnecessary, and I could see what they were doing, but I think sometimes it's not necessarily bad, and it as a concept it's good. It's just there's just something slightly off about it that you can't really put your finger on, and I think it's just everything just kind of fell slightly below expectations, and then partnered with her running order, I think that was what killed it.
The things I found weird about the performance was she was on that plinth that seemed to go up and down for no reason. Really, from watching on TV, you couldn't barely tell that it was moving. And why was it moving? Why not just have if you want a plinth, have her at the top of it all the time? There's no reason for go up and down. That made no sense whatsoever. And it kind of looked cheap when you did see it moving. The moving parts made it look cheap. And a tearaway sort of dress that was hiding the uppy down plinth.
Well, that was the point, wasn't it?
What, to make it look cheap?
No, yeah. they lower. If I remember rightly, they lowered it so that two stagehands who were in sort of black gimp suits could sort of pull it apart, and then they had to sort of leopard crawl. It ruins the magic of telly.
They shouldn't have bothered.
And they should have kept the gimp suits, to be honest. They did a great job. Like, honestly, it was like watching, like, I don't know, it was like these just black morph characters just sort of leopard crawling off the stage, having ripped a dress apart or whatever. But the other
this sounds like an RCE fever dream. I'm going to say, we were talking about them last time. This sounds like something they'll do next year. Don't get Ideas Island,
or maybe do.
But the other again, magic of television being ruined was that I was sat slightly behind where she was on the podium, and you could see that there was a sort of almost hockey stick. The only thing keeping her up there was a sort of hockey stick type thing just behind her, that if she felt a bit unbalanced, she would hold on to, and that was the height of it, if you'll excuse the pun. The whole thing was just weird, but
the thing is, so she's like pinned to one spot where she can't move or be free, because if she does, she'll do herself a mischief. And she looked uncomfortable throughout the entire performance, like shit, I could fall at any moment.
It's weird because she was at the Camp in Furnace press meet and greet on the Friday, and the head of delegation for France were like, she's the next Edith Piaf, she's brilliant, she's great, we've got her all the way from Canada to come in, she's definitely going to win it. And there was a lot of French TV was sort of very much of the view that they'd nailed it. And they haven't.
If she's the next Edith Piaf, why did you have her doing disco?
I'm sorry, saying she's the next Edith Piaf, like Barbara Pravi, didn't exist.
What was interesting was I saw a performance by Grace Jones last year in London that looked very, very similar. And I do wonder whether they borrowed quite a bit from Grace Jones, because obviously she's huge in France as well in terms of disco, but it was exactly the same with the plinth. It was exactly the same with the disco ball effect. And I do wonder whether they thought, Grace Jones, this might work out. She's popular with the queer community as well. And I think they kind of borrowed that idea. And I don't think it works well when you take it out of the context of Grace Jones, personally.
No, because Grace Jones can do that whilst doing a hula hoop to save the rhythm, because I've seen that, and that is a show. Do you think maybe the issue was that, as Ewan said, it couldn't pick a lane because it did switch after a minute, but also you then got a disco song for 2 minutes and she stood still. She's static during a disco song. And she's up that high. She can't even do a shoulder jig because she's worried she's going to, have a health and safety write-up.
Yeah, I think if they just stuck to what they did in their music video, I think that would have been a lot better. Because I remember it was rumored that she's going to be doing something dangerous. So everyone pictured that she'd be on top of a giant disco ball. And I know that's quite overkill, but I think if they're going to go all the way, they should have just done that. But it just looked a bit cheap. They should have just kept it minimal like the music video, or just done the whole thing, because then at least that would have gotten some votes because it would have stood out. And
even the LEDs for the French flag looked a bit shit. Like, I mean, you didn't. I mean, number one, just because she'd said, I think the lyric is like a romance français, isn't it? And they then put a French flag up. I don't need that sort of level of interpretation. But also, it just looked shit. Like the sort of individual blocky. It just looked, yeah. I'm going to ask the most important. Sorry,
I was going to say that shot on the TV screen was clearly what they had in their eyes of, this is the winner of prizes moment. That is the photo when she's won with the confetti. That's the only reason I'd had that in. So now you kind of look at it with that's clearly intention, and say just how bad it looked on screen. It's just like, oh no. Because clearly they thought that's the winning moment when she's back up there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And that's how they pictured it on photo. It was the confetti and the pyro. That will look fantastic as a winner's moment, but it never happened.
I think the song you're looking for there, Ellie, is I bet you'll look good on the dance floor.
Yeah, I know that I am a million years old and I've watched this contest since, forever. But I mean, one of the modern aspects that I often have a problem with is this infatuation of props. I feel so many delegation bring some kind of prop or some kind of visual thing because they think they need it. They think they will have to do it. And so often they do nothing but distract from the actual performance, like what you said about Italy, the acrobatics that nobody paid attention to. With France,
I paid attention, but then I couldn't follow what was going on elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. But it just distracted. It didn't do the job. If you have a prop or something, it should elevate what you have. It should not distract from what you have. And I think that France has done this so many times. They mess up the visuals completely. But I must say that I remember my first listening of the French entry, and I remember distinctly thinking, I really like the vibe of this, but this song is not good enough. This does not sit on a first listen. This is the kind of song that grows on you. When you've heard it 10 times, you'll be like, oh, yeah, this is a good one. But on the first listening, it goes in all directions, and it doesn't have that instant hook. You can't follow it on the first listen, and you just get one listen on the night. So France, what I was going to say is that France, I think, I'm going to get back to this on the UK, but I think that France is a remarkable country that has a remarkable music industry. So they can't afford not to send in remarkable entries, because that is where the bar is. That is what people expect. If France sends in something that is nice, that is not good enough, Say one safe country that isn't in, say Slovakia. Let's take Slovakia. They come back, they have a nice song. That's fine. Slovakia can be nice. France, I'm sorry, you can't be nice. You need to rock. And they just need to select their entries more carefully. They need a smashing song and then not mess up the staging. That's, I'd say, my best advice for France.
And I want to ask the most important question about Lazara. The middle finger. Does anyone care? I wasn't that horrified by it, but Twitter seems to have gone mad for it. I want to see more of that at Eurovision. I want to see people flipping tables and stuff and all sorts, but
I'm more perplexed by how she actually manages she's not fully bending her fingers. It's really difficult to do.
The smallest, she's got like the smallest middle finger in the world. It's really,
she's got her own style with it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I love how her reaction was just to be such a diva like that. Well, she's got the head of delegation just shaking her head in disgust as well. But I guess some of the Twitter outrage is because a lot of the fans have given a lot of support to Lazara and she's very receptive. But then when she hasn't got the points to match it, that's her reaction. Maybe some people do feel like that's a bit of a slap in the face. I get it, but also she's clearly very competitive and she wants to do better. So her reaction is valid and it will go down as an iconic moment of TV history. Let's be honest, we're not going to forget that. And that's going to be used as a reaction gift for years to come. I kind of loved it.
I think more artists should put their middle finger up to televote. I think Spain should have done that. I think Blanca Paloma should have done that. I think Taya and Selena should have done that as well.
Less discongeniality. Show how you feel. I'm all for it.
Because the thing is one of three things happen when you get the televote result in. You either, if you get a bad televote result, you either do what James Newman did, which is go, well, this is shit. Let's embrace it. Hooray. Or you do what Lazara did, which is swear at camera, or you do that really awkward sort of, I'm putting a big smile on this, but I wish I was dead right now. And that the third category are the worst group because they're just deeply dying inside, but they're for some reason trying to hold it together. And I want to see more. I want to see more middle fingers. I want to see pillows flying. I want to see, I want
table flips.
Yeah, I want.
But at the same time there, Andrew, do you want to see younger singers have, be incredibly emotional, be sad, be heartbroken, and have that broadcast to 180 million people? Yeah, we can argue that we want more emotion, but at the same time, we can't manufacture it. I mean, if we'd had that semi-final results presentation as we did, we would have seen emotion, but it would have been cruel emotion. And you know what? If the artists want to show the emotion in the way that Lazara did, I am absolutely all for it. What I don't want is for the TV producers to expect and encourage it. This is a contest that we spend 364 days, 23 hours and 35 minutes saying we're all together. It's great to be together. And in the last 50 minutes ago, oh, we're gonna point a camera at you. Well, you score no points. Ha 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 ha.
And I think actually one part that I really don't like these days is the way the televote is given. I liked it a lot better that they just read out from the lowest televote up, because I think that the way they do it now is just this kind of getting this really negative emotion presented as, and I think it clashes with what Eurovision wants to be, because I thought especially in Rotterdam, where it was like 4 countries that got 0 points from the televote, and it felt like it hadn't built up to that. It had built up to this, oh, we're back, we're together, everything is nice and cozy, and we love being here. And then suddenly, for the last 10 minutes, it all went completely, it all shifted in a very unpleasant way, I must say. So yeah, I don't like this trying to shake negative emotion out of the performers. But if Lazara feels that, okay, I'm done with this, je ne peux rien, and gives the world the finger, then okay, fine, do it, go for it.
Their vote stuff goes in the opposite direction as well, because I don't know if did anyone notice that Moldova came top 10 with the public? They did, but they took it.
I think it was hard to tell. I think the televotes, it was really difficult to tell because it was so concentrated towards the top. Was it like between 10 and 15, or there was like 10 points between them? There's a massive chunk in the middle where they all got kind of 40s and 50s. Like I know Albania, for example, got 10th in the televote, which is amazing, but no one knew because it was all kind of, they all were kind of getting the same ones, and then suddenly there was Kalia who got a massive chunk, and then it was like, you know, the top 3 got the big chunks, and then everything else kind of is very sparse. It was very weird. I don't think this has happened for a while, where it's been this sparse between all these lots of little countries.
I've just had a look at the numbers there, Faith. Between 8th and 18th is only 50 points.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't think it's usually like that.
We had very much had an outlier year in terms of the televote. And to try and have a knee-jerk reaction, because we've had the incredible outlier result of 90% on one side, 90% on the other side, televote and jury, and to try and decide what to do because of our outlier, I still think the problem is not the 50-50 split. I think the problem is presentation of the votes at the end of the show, and I don't think that's been cracked. And I think this year magnified that, because you spend so long giving it the jury, and then you give it this higgledy-piggledy televote. If it was me, I would be trying to brainstorm a different way to present televote and jury rather than change televote and jury, because in terms of the scoring, I think we've got the best solution possible out of all our choices. Well, maybe not best. Let's say we've got the least worst solution out of all our choices in terms of making the scores, but in terms of telling people the scores, there's still a lot to do here.
If the jury are to go, then potentially they will look at how they will deliver the points in maybe a more fairer or more conscientious way that isn't as kind of, you know, gunfire as it has become, really, the way that it's kind of shut off. We'll have to see, though.
I just go back to all the spokespeople, but that's it. They're not going to give the spokespeople.
I think they'll keep a sort of this 2-part voting of jury and televote, because they've got that jeopardy of that the winner at the end of the jury vote may get overturned. You know, we saw it last year of the UK. If you go back to the old way of doing it, of let's just go around every country until we're finished, I can't remember the last time it came down to the last, you know, in the pre-dual voting era, I can't remember a time when it came down to the last vote. It was probably maybe 2003. You know, the winner is declared 3 to 4 countries before the end usually, and that's very boring for a TV producer and probably for the audience. So this idea that, you know, here's the result, but it can all change, is probably it's probably, I can't see them getting rid of it, because it you know, I mean, Portugal, for example, you know, 2018 was a good example where, you know, Austria, you know, won the jury but got completely overturned very quickly.
I also like a lot of the dialogue that's happened, I've seen online at the moment, about how the televote isn't about voting against anybody, it's about voting for certain things, and that's why some countries have lost out. And I don't think that's really been captured in the spirit that, you know, when countries, you know, like Blanca Paloma receive such a crap televote, that doesn't necessarily mean that people didn't like a song. It just means that they didn't want to actually pick up and vote for that over another song. And it feels like if they could crack how to present that in line with that kind of concept and idea, it'd be better. But also you will have a bit of devious TV production thinking, yeah, it's people are expecting the nil point moment as something really, really negative. And they'll kind of stick to that. But it would be nice to see them kind of understand and present that idea that televotes are not voting against anybody, they're voting for people. It just may not have been voting for someone else on the night.
Especially when a phone voter may only use one vote from out of, you know, and they've got 25 to choose from. They you know, they just haven't chosen your one. That's the France. Then what do they do differently? Do they pick another internal candidate? Did they go back to a selection? How do they solve next year?
Then Barbara Pravi. She'll sort them out.
I think France have the luxury of being able to experiment with various things, because they have had very good results. Obviously, they haven't won for a very, very long time, but out of the big 5, they're probably the second strongest. So I think they have the luxury of being able to experiment with all these things, which is why I think they went internal this year. Try something different. I don't think it really matters for France. I think if it will hit, it will hit, no matter whether it's the national final or the internal selection. I don't think there's really a right or wrong way to do it. Yeah, I think with France in particular, I think they kind of know what they're doing. yeah, maybe improve the staging. Although I will say I did like Fulham's staging last year, but I think if they get a better stage designer, I don't think they're normally pretty good at choosing songs. So I'm not too worried about France as a delegation.
Cool. Should we move on to Spain?
Let's.
So Blanca Paloma came one place, beg your pardon, below France in 17th, with a song that my interpretation of people's reactions was they either loved it or hated it. So what did you guys love or hate it, or did you expect this to happen?
I fell in the hate category, and I feel bad saying that because I appreciate how skilled she is at doing that song and how culturally relevant it is to Spain. It's really good for them to send something like that. But I think possibly in music taste, I come down to my music taste. I don't feel are in line with the Eurovision fandom. So I always found this a very difficult listen to. I would never listen to it. I'd always skip it on Spotify when it came up on a playlist. And I feel bad saying that, but I found it something I couldn't enjoy, whilst also appreciating how bloody good her vocals were. The way that she nails it with barely a wisp of music to get the right note. She is so talented at what she does. But I didn't enjoy it, and I feel a lot of public felt the same way. However, the juries, I feel, should have, even though they scored it all right, I do feel they massively underscored her on a technical basis. And that needs looking at.
Absolutely. There was this interview going around on Twitter. I don't know if any of you saw it, and it was, I don't know who was being interviewed, but they said that they were talking, because there was this massive argument about whether the juries are actually following the criteria. And someone said they spoke to one of the jury members, and the jury member said that they put Spain and Moldova very, very low because they thought it sounded like club music and it was too young for them, because they said that they're in their 40s and it feels like something that's too young for them, which is very weird. Yeah, they said Moldova and Spain. I just
what clubs are they going to?
I want to go to that club.
I know. but it just shows like how out of touch they are with the criteria. I just think I think running order killed them as well. They were in between Cyprus and Sweden. Cyprus, very handsome. People love voting for a handsome man with a good voice, big vocals, in between basically the favorite, the big star of the whole contest. That killed her. But yeah, I agree. It's not very listenable for me anyway, as a studio version. But I guess it was too theatrical and metaphorical for people outside of Spain to understand. I don't think it deserved 5. I don't think anyone was expecting it to get that little televote. I think we knew it would definitely do better with the juries. If anything, a lot of people thought it would be a jury winner, but clearly I just think it was too out there. And I don't want it to discourage Spain because their national final was so good and so strong. And I just think that this year was a big anomaly for them. I don't think they should be discouraged. I think they just need to continue what they're doing and be proud that they sent that, because it was a really good song. It's just good songs aren't always good for Eurovision.
Yeah, I think
a couple of years ago, Spain would have loved 17th place. If Slow-mo hadn't happened, this would have been a triumph. So I think it was still a credible result for Sondheim. I'm with you again. I appreciated the spectacle and thought it was a nice representation of their art, but to me it was a load of artful noises. I think part of the problem with Spain is that their culture is so different from everyone else in Europe, because they've got almost like Arabic influences in their culture, and it seems quite alien to European ears, whereas Ukraine can go off and do their folk music, and even to us a bit, it doesn't sound so unusual. But with Spain, I think that's possibly more difficult for them when they do more folk, more traditional music.
But I think we said this sorry, I think we said this last week when we talked briefly about Portugal and how they do their own thing at Festival de Canção, just anticipating that they've got a very good Portuguese style of song, knowing that it may not do all that well at Eurovision. Whereas Spain seem far less comfortable sending something that represents their sort of national culture for fear of doing badly at Eurovision, which is why, you know, something more modern like Slow Mo did a lot better. I've sort of drifted off as what I was going to say, but I find that, and I don't know if that was it. I don't know if it's because they're in the big five that they feel they've got to sort of crank out top tens every year, and so therefore they haven't got the luxury of what Portugal do of a bit like what Tobias said before about Slovakia being nice or whatever. Portugal can send Portuguese stuff knowing that the country likes it regardless of what Europe thinks, whereas Spain have to sort of meet a middle ground of being Spanish whilst also justifying their big five status, if that makes sense. I've rambled there.
I think the issue here is like it's almost like a push and pull between the jury and the Spanish public. Because if we look at the Spanish public winner in Benidorm Fest, they have been heavily Spanish influenced entries. You've had Blanca, and then you had Tanchigueras, two heavily rooted Spanish sounding songs. And the jury is what prevented Tanchigueras winning. It worked in Chanel's favor in the end. My issue from first, and I remember watching it so vividly the first time and thinking like, wow, that was a spectacle. That was impressive on stage. And she nailed that. The song itself, would I ever listen to that out of choice? No. It's impressive, but it's not for me. And I'll never forget when I spoke to my friend who's a very big Eurovision fan like me, he's from Gibraltar. He said he grew up on this. It reminds him of like the songs as a child. This is very much what you grow up on. And I think that sentence sealed her fate. It was so heavily in Spanish culture, they almost forgot you can't vote for yourself. I mean, send what you want and send something that represents you, that's great. And if you're not bothered about the competitive aspect, that's fine. The issue is the Spanish fans and the Spanish delegation do care about the competitive element. The fact that the head of delegation has already lost her position a week after Eurovision, and they've gone back to the woman who before Benidorm Fest, who was getting 25th consistently, has stepped in, worries me. That really worries me that they've had one, mid-table result and gone, she can't hack it anymore. And we're going to go back to this woman who in the last 7 years has got 25th, 22nd, bottom fives. It makes me worried about what's going to happen with Benidorm Fest with the quality, to be honest, because the structure of the show is fantastic. And the last 2 years, we've been spoiled with the songs and the quality we've had, especially this year. We had some big Spanish artists competing. And the song, again, it's artful, but I think a lot of people, especially for the first time watching that, when it finished, probably didn't know what was happening on stage and probably kind of sat there going, I don't know if I liked that or not. And because they weren't sure, they didn't vote for it. Yet no one saw it only getting 5 points, especially if you looked on Twitter. It was going to win and run away with the whole thing and challenge Lorraine. I was never a fan of it. I didn't wish it on her, though. But at the same time, it just proves that you can't predict how people are going to vote. We can theorize for months. We don't know. I don't think they should change anything regarding Benidorm Fest, except maybe make the jury not so heavily weighted or don't have set scores for the public vote, because you kind of knew Blanca had won before the televote came in because there was no way she could get overtaken because it's a set amount, not like in Melfest or something where it's a percentage of the votes. Yeah, I just don't think Spain should have such a knee-jerk reaction to, as we said, a 17th, which they would have killed for 3 years ago. It's just because they got that top three. That's what they expect every year now. And they need to almost understand it's not always going to happen. You're going to have highs, you're going to have lows. But, what do you do? But it was very impressive, but it's something I was never going to vote for. And it's just, that's the thing. I think it was too rooted in Spanish culture for anyone else outside of Spain or the Iberian nations to really appreciate it and vote for it.
I think flamenco has a history of not doing well at Eurovision. Bautista in 1965, zero points. And then they sent a Nuevo flamenco song in, I think, 1986. And it came 20th out of 23. It tanked. It's difficult music for the casual viewer, I think.
I think one thing that Benidorm Fest needs to consider is bringing in an international component to that jury. Ben Robertson was down there for ESC Insight disclosure, visit Benidorm, paid for his hotel and transfer, but I'm about to lambast Benidorm Fest anyway. And he said that nobody expected that song to win until they heard it. And then the bubble inside Benidorm Fest decided that's our winner. And I wasn't sure what he meant by that. And Elliot, I think you've answered that with your friend from Gibraltar's question. So I think they need to take a leaf out of Melfest's book. And if you're going for an international contest, maybe bring in some international flavor or portion to another jury, maybe a 10% or 15%. There's some consideration there. But I do want to contrast one thing about the language. Yeah, you're right. This was very hard to follow if you don't know Spanish. You couldn't work out what the story was. But we could all work out what the story was with Due Vita, even though we didn't know Italian, because we could see it in the performance. We could feel the emotion. We didn't need to understand the words. Caria, the majority of us, even on this chat, hi Tobias, don't know what he was talking about. It meant that the last minute of the song was, why is there this sudden change of gears? We'll go read the lyrics. Oh, right, it's because he's so fair. But we didn't need to understand fully what all those words meant because we could feel it on this stage. And we're back to what Faith said. A good song isn't necessarily good for Eurovision. Spain had a great song here, but it wasn't competitive because it didn't tell a story visually. Simple trick. Turn the volume down, watch your performance. Do you still get the story? If the answer is no, you need to go back and do your staging again. France, we did not get the story. Spain, we did not get the story. Italy, we got the story. Finland, we got the story. Sweden, we got the story, even though it looked like David Lean doing Lawrence of Arabia, the musical. You need to be able to visualize the story as well as vocalize it. Spain vocalized it lovely, but they didn't do that. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's a very simple reason why Spain only got 5 points. To use the language of reality TV, they got memory hold by Sweden. It didn't matter what Spain did. They were never getting anything from the public because everybody was just looking at Lorraine.
I think the other thing that for me is really interesting, what Blanca was trying to do is to look at how similar kind of performers have acted within the Spanish music industry. And I'm immediately thinking of artists like Rosalía, who has managed to cut through and has managed to make flamenco more accessible to international audiences. And it was almost like if that song could have been, I mean, I don't know if fully reworked, but if there could have been some engagement to create something along those lines, it might have been more successful. Because I really do, having been in the arena, really felt her vocal performance was completely flawless. It was absolutely incredible to kind of witness. I completely agree the story didn't come across as well, but I do wonder musically whether they could have revisited that and seen what makes artists like Rosalía who do that kind of thing more successful, rather than having to rely on constantly that kind of reggaeton pop thing that Slow-Mo was kind of like drew on, and that other acts have drawn on as well. And they don't need to always do that. They just need to find a way, if they're going to do something like take elements of flamenco, look at how it's done successfully and how to musically communicate that alongside the story too.
So do they persist with the Benidorm Fest, or do they go internal? Or I think we all know the answer to that one, but
Benidorm Fest.
They keep on with Benidorm Fest. But I think my initial reaction to Benidorm Fest, now I'm going to get everyone against me here, but I thought that, again, the songs weren't good enough. I bought them on a second or third listen, but I never got the instant thing with any of them. They looked great. They were really well staged and the performers were good. But it was difficult to take something away at once, and I think you need that instant thingy. I think with the song that they went for, I don't think the style was the big problem, because, you know, Spanish cultural music has done well across Europe occasionally. Gypsy Kings were a huge act in the late 80s, early 90s. I just think there wasn't a song to it. It was just, you know, she was just vocalizing the life out of it. She was really, really good, but she didn't have anything to work with. It was just a lot of really high-pitched tones and it got really tiresome to listen to, I thought. So, I mean, I don't think the style was bad. I thought there wasn't a strong enough song to work with. But my thoughts with Spain, sorry if I'm derailing this again, but
not at all.
Yeah, I agree that she should have been marked up by the juries according to the current criteria, because she was an excellent vocalist. But on the other hand, in the final, there were a lot of entries, I could mention at least two, that were making use of the new rules and that were hiding their own vocals behind a lot of pre-recorded vocals. Let me throw Czechia in here. Let me throw Cyprus in here. They made it look like they were doing a lot of high and difficult notes while they were moving and doing stuff. But if you paid attention, they weren't, because all those difficult notes were already on tape. And then I wonder, should the juries be told who is doing the full live and who has it on tape? Is the jury supposed to find this out for themselves? Or should they just remove the great voice criteria? Because it's so odd to me that it should be that they should mark up good vocals when we can't be sure, are these vocals live or are they enhanced in a studio in advance? I think it's really weird the way it is now. They need to decide what foot to stand on. Like, should we keep up those rules and drop the good singing criteria, or should they keep marking up good voices? But then we need to make it more see-through who is actually doing the vocals or not.
Ask the question, is it a song contest or a singing contest?
Not
Personally, I don't think vocals should come into it. Well, I mean, there's always a space that, isn't there? You don't want just 25, 26 songs performed shockingly, but it's not The Voice. I could go and watch The Voice. I could go and watch other singing shows, but I'm here. It's a song contest at the end of the day. I think that was the issue with Spain, is that it did kind of, it was fantastically vocally, but it was just meandering for 3 minutes to me anyway. I think that was what killed that in the end. So, yeah, I mean, I think I feel like the jury were kind of just in that sense then, because the song, I just don't think personally was strong enough.
Yeah, and I think equally there's I think we'll come to Germany shortly, but people will appreciate that he put in a very good vocal performance, but it was not a classical. It was not a textbook Pop Idol X Factor singing performance, so therefore it wasn't regarded by the juries as good singing. But I think people in the know said he did great. Chris, I think you're more in the know than me. I'm still
we'll come to him, but yeah, he was doing some difficult stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think the juries appreciated that. So obviously it's the turn of the United Kingdom. Mae Muller with I Wrote a Song and came 25th. This was a weird one because in the betting odds, she was, I think, 8th favourite to win, but was first favourite to come last. So the bookies knew something we didn't, I think, because there was a lot of positivity for this song, I felt, and then the result didn't match it. What was everyone's view of Mae, or how she performed in the song itself?
I have a lot of thoughts. I've been kind of doing a little bit of a deep dive into what exactly happened. So I'll be very quick, I promise. So when the first song was first released, it was okay, I thought, but I knew this isn't a Eurovision winning song, and I wasn't, it felt a bit repetitive, but everyone loved it. So I was like, okay, maybe this could actually do well. I think we all knew that they were going to go for a pop girl. We all like that was a given. So, and I think I can kind of get into the mind of the tap music, and I can see why they chose it. You know, up and coming singer Mae Muller, I had heard of her before. A lot of people hadn't. A catchy song, pop song, she is competent live. She can sing live. She did say that she was very nervous on the night though, and that's why she was shaky. So it has all the makings of a good pop girl Eurovision song. I think, again, similar to what happened with France, everything just fell a bit short. I think the staging looked cool in concept. It just didn't match the song. We weren't really drawn to her. We didn't feel a connection to her. Her running order didn't do her any favors because I think all the pop girl votes went to Poland and Israel. And her vocals were a little bit shaky. I just think it wasn't bad. It was a pretty good, we did a pretty good job of it. But I think they just missed the mark on what a Eurovision winning song is. And when it comes to Eurovision, especially for the UK, who have faltered for a very long time, you have to be in it to win it. You can't really send something that's like, oh, I think this could get top 10. I'm not sure if it's going to win. We have to go for it every single year, because otherwise we will get results like this. Even if we don't deserve them, we really have to throw everything but the kitchen sink at it.
I think this fell into one major hole, and it comes back to the point about the bookmakers. Now, the bookies, by and large, the bookmakers' odds are based on where the money is going. So if, because everyone loved the UK song, they're putting money on it. Doesn't matter if it's good or not, that's where the money is going. That's what's going to push it up. The issue with this song, and it falls back into a bit of a deep dive here with Melfairs, where Kariatu competed in 2021 with a pop song similar to this. It sounds great in studio, it sounds great in the radio, it's a brilliant Spotify hit. How do you stage a song like this? It is so difficult to stage a pop song like this because there's no real narrative to a sense. And as Faye said, we didn't get a narrative on stage. It was her with 4 dancers. She was very static. The fact she was in all black as well, I think she kind of like faded. There was no connection to her and her dancers. If she had a bit of pink on or something would have helped. But her staging, as much as I love her, and she is phenomenal, her staging was just her face. And I think some people may have been put off that because it's a bit self-indulgent, but also it kind of shows that they didn't really know how to get this story across lyrically on stage. Because how do you do this? And also where your hook is la-di-da-di-da-da 3 times, what do you fill that time of music with? It's really difficult. And as Faith said, the minute Noah Carell got drawn second half, I knew we were dead in the water, because they were going to push her as late as they could, which was song 23. She's an absolute pop star and, you know, phenomenal performer. And any votes that May would have had were taken. From the minute Unicorn came out, she was our biggest competition, and Noah had to go first half for May to stand out. And I think May maybe got a bit shaken up by Noah, but the fact that she was so on it and like fantastic, and in 10 minutes she's got to go on stage. It's nerve-wracking. It will make you nervous. It will not upset you, that's the wrong word, but it will make you think, you go, holy shit, she's just completely knocked that out the park. Yeah. And I've got to follow that in 2 songs' time. It does unnerve you a bit, but I think they're the 2 things. It's just that we were a bit unfortunate. I think, as I said, when doing this little souvenir thing, we should keep this sort of quality, keep TAP involved, but do like a national final. Go like UMK, 6 songs of high quality with radio influence and like pops, like, you know, label influence on it. Have a really strong national final, so we still get a bit of a say, but we're not going to have like a potential Scooch moment or Casey Price where, oh, the funny one wins because we can't be trusted to vote. Make sure the quality is there. They do a live performance so we know they can nail it live, and then we're sorted. Because I think that's the issue. If she had vocals like Sam Ryder, we would have done absolutely fine. It's just like there's 1 or 2 things, but I think keep this sort of idea. It's working. We're getting great ambassadors, great songs, great involvement for the contest. It's changing the UK's narrative. It's just a case of give us 5 or 6 songs to pick from. That's what I want personally. Do I think it will happen? No, but I don't think we should get too disheartened from one bad result, because she got a bit nervous. It was a strong year. It happens. But the interaction leading up to it should be where we take things away from, because the involvement and the talk about May's song was fantastic. And I think that's what we should focus on. The last 2 years, there's been a lot of talk about our entry, and that's what we need to focus on.
One thing we need to keep doing is actually May has had a lot of radio play. The office where I work it was on the radio constantly before and after, and that's how you're going to attract even better songs in the future, because people are going to know they're going to get radio play. Yeah. We need to try different styles, not just pop. I mean, has the UK sent anything other than pop? Really, it's been pop songs, ballads. One hip hop song in the 90s was absolutely robbed. Love City Groove, shout out to them. But I think we need to branch out into other genres that we have in the UK. Why aren't we sending a grime artist? Let's really take a chance.
Do you remember Daz Sampson, where he tried to do a bit of grime and rap, and how well that went?
Yeah, but that's Daz Sampson. I mean, we have great grime artists in the UK, not just Daz. What did he do at Learn at School today? Kinky Boots Sampson.
I actually tweeted, I don't know if you heard the band Yonica, they're what would I say, like alternative rock band?
Yes.
They're forefront lead singer, and I tweeted them a few days after the final saying, would you ever consider doing Eurovision? And they replied and they said yes. And now everyone, because they saw that, and also there was a lot of talk, because we think, okay, we had a guy, we had a girl, next is a band, and so now there is a lot of talk of what bands we should have. But yeah, no, I agree. I think we need to move away from pop, like kind of safe. I think we need to try something a little bit different, because we haven't done that for such a long time, and I don't trust the public with a national final. Even if we do, even if all the songs are amazing quality, they will always choose the safe one, even if the vocals are amazing. Like Michael Rice, arguably some of the best vocals of the whole competition. Boring song, but that's what people are drawn to. They're drawn to the big X Factor, like X Factor single song. I think we need to stick internal. Maybe they should get opinions from kind of other music, like almost like a jury, an international jury, but internal, maybe, just to get opinions from other countries, like big hitters like Sweden. But I think we just need to do something different. And I know that's easier said than done, but I really hope we go for something. I also agree. I think grime would be amazing. I just don't think we're there yet. I think we're still building it up, but I do think a band is needed next.
I mean, I would love to see
campaigning for Random Hand to represent with a ska punk song. That's my big shout out for a band, Random Hand, ska punk, really British.
There's just part of me that remembers Dave's performance of Black at the Brits and thinking that would have absolutely killed at the Eurovision Song Contest. Big shout out to Ellie for introducing that. I don't think we've stuck with pop. Let me just be controversial for a moment. Sam, I will argue, was rock just about, with a little squint of the eye. Lucy Jones did Big West End Show. That's not pop. Electro Velvet did Electro Swing, which at that point was very big on mainland Europe. Let's put aside the presentation questions. So I think for me, there's three things I want to highlight here. The first one is that top 10 result is worth more than a top 10 finish at the Eurovision Song Contest. Bums on seats, streams listened to, singles sold. That's what the music industry wants. And I think that top 10 negates a lot of the problem of where the UK finished. To be fair, once we drew 26th and last, we were dead in the water. As a country, we were not going to get that. She got Memory Hold by Noah Carell. She got Memory Hold by Let 3. She got Memory Hold by Joker Out. Bang, bang, bang. And then it took so long to set up the stage that everybody thought Eurovision was over. And Hannah Waddington has to go, no, there's one more. Stay, please. There's one more. There's one more. There's one more. It's like everybody's already made their mind up. We were dead at that. But the main thing I want to say here is that I want the team back again. The team that worked with TAP, that got Sam's result, weren't there this year. They were busy putting on the Eurovision Song Contest. We had the team from the bench. Next year, we might have that team from the bench again. They might step up. They might be the full delegation, in which case they've got a year's worth of experience. But a lot of that knowledge of how to run the contest, how to be competitive, that we had with Sam was not available this year because the focus was on Liverpool. So next year, TAP, yes, please, more of the corporate knowledge of the contest coming back from the hosting into the presenting of the song, and just do the same again. The artists now have confidence, as Faith pointed out there, that they want to go to Eurovision. The music industry has confidence that it is not a career killer. Keep doing that. But one last thing for the BBC. You made sure that Sam was seen everywhere after Eurovision. You had the Queen's concert, you had the Hogmanay show, and he kept popping up. May needs to keep popping up as well, because then the industry goes, the BBC will continue to support the act that they sent to the Eurovision Song Contest. So that's what I would say. Keep promoting May, even though the contest is over. Keep TAP involved, and don't restrict yourself to genre. Don't restrict yourself to focusing for a band. Certainly bring them into that. Just get TAP to choose a good song. They're the professionals. The BBC delegation, you have to sell music. They would be working in music. They're working in broadcasting. They can do the staging. TAP does the music. Same again, please.
About the team being different, I think there was a big issue this year with camera work. I don't know if it was the team last year that made it good for Sam, but it wasn't right for May. So it was the biggest party in the arena. Everyone loved it, but it didn't come across at all on screen. We had the screens that required you to see it from straight on the whole time, in order so you didn't get funny angles on the steps and the stage, and that meant there was pretty much no movement in the camera. If you could watch side by side, and I've tried this, I tried to cut it together for Twitter, but I failed miserably. But you can watch a bit of Noah Kirel and May side by side during like the big dancey party bit of their song, and Noah isn't moving much more than May, but it looks like it on camera because the camera's moving, you've got the lights moving in the background. But with May, she just stocks still, the camera stays there while she goes from side to side. There's a bit in the choreography where they all point to one side of the stage. That should be the cue for the camera to switch that side, for them to dance towards that camera. But it just stays still. If they dance to one side, they got dance back to the middle, and it doesn't look very good at all. So
I think the great shame for the UK entry was the music video was really good. I mean, I heard the UK entry in a toilet in work, because I had to sort of very quickly run to listen to it on Radio 2, and was a bit underwhelmed. But then I listened to it a few minutes. But then you see the video, the scene in the video where she almost kicks the door in of the cafe and sort of strolls in and then starts singing the chorus, is a really strong, powerful. To me anyway, I really liked it. And none of those features from the video turned up. What you got was a staircase, which when I saw her on the Wednesday, she struggled to get down. You know, you could tell she was looking at her feet to get down, which, I mean, I would do exactly the same if I was doing that. But I just think there were elements of the music video that looked really good that didn't get there. And again, I think people have said this already, but the comparison to Israel historically do that thing best of one singer, 5 dancers, all looking very slick on stage. And that was the thing, was that Noah and the dancers just looked slicker and more drilled. And you're right that the interplay between singer and dancers didn't quite pull off the UK, to me anyway.
Kind of agree with what you said, Pete, about it should have brought more of the video in, because I feel like the song, it told a great story, especially in the music video. It's super simple, but just a girl who's been wronged, and she's got all her mates together, and she's gonna rise above it. She should have come out there. She was styled too old, I felt. She should have come out there with what looked like her friends. Should have all been just in their trainers and having fun with it, if that makes more sense. I feel like it could have easily been too over polished for what it was meant to be. I felt like we've all said, it just didn't work. It could have told a better story than what it did on the night.
I think with what TAP did, I think they found the song, but they didn't think about the full package. And I think this is what has happened. And this is what I said before about, so just because it's a good song doesn't mean it's a good Eurovision song. And I think this is something they really need to learn, because I feel like maybe they might be thinking, oh, but we did everything right, so why did we still finish so low? And you have to look at what the top 5 have done and like listen to the studio version and what they did on stage, and they need to identify what makes a song a Eurovision winner, because you could argue, oh, maybe they didn't want to win again. I think one of the producers said they were aiming to win again, but as soon as I heard the song, and a lot of people and I didn't want to say anything because everyone's being so positive, but I knew, I was like, I don't think this is going to do well, because even if like as a fan we think, okay, it's probably not going to win, I think especially with the UK, we haven't quite built up that reputation to get the votes. People aren't used to voting for us, so we really need to impress people to vote for us, which is what happened with Sam. But she just wasn't quite there, and she just got overwhelmed. And yeah, I just think they don't quite understand what a Eurovision winning song is yet, and that's what they need to learn for next year.
Sonically, it's a really thin song. It needs what we had with Sam was almost a wall of sound. It's what you had with Tattoo. It was a wall of sound. If you listen to I wrote a song with headphones on, it's very thin sounding and empty sounding. I mean, I heard the song a few days before it was officially announced. It was leaked to me. There was a few leakers in the industry who should know better, who went around leaking it to anybody and everybody, but I shan't name any names, which was interesting who was leaking it. But when I heard it, I was like, that sounds just there was no, it just had nothing behind it, just like ramming it into your face. It was like very is the only way I can describe it, and that's really bad description.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was just gonna say, sorry, that's what I forgot to say. Is like, I'm not a music expert at all. I'm crap at music, but it was just missing some oomph. There was just something. It just felt like something was missing. And yeah, it's catchy and fun, and it's just, it doesn't have that like wow that like takes you back which pop songs can have. Like, I will argue Noah Corral's had that just because the whole package was flawless, but we didn't have that luxury. And it just, sonically, it just needed something else as well, not just the staging. But I agree, yeah.
It was completely on the same level, wasn't it? If you just listen to that track again, there is no dynamic shift at all. There's no range going up and down. It's kind of permanently staying up that same level.
Interestingly, there's those big string moments at the very start, and then they bugger off.
Yeah.
But interestingly, because I thought France, Israel, and the UK all started their songs with either a big, France did a big string opening, we did a big brass string opening, Israel did a sort of quite big, and then you get into a sort of dance track sort of type. I'm terrible at describing songs. Immediately afterwards, and ours was just they were quite similar. And you're right that Israel had appeared 2 songs before, so it was they were quite similar. I think the other thing is we can put to rest once and for all that we need to stop sending songs with the same chord structure as Crybaby, because we've done it twice now and we've not done very well with it.
It's not even the chord structure. If you play the opening, if everybody can remember the opening of da 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 dun 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 da. Okay, was I doing Crybaby or was I doing I Wrote a Song? Once you realize that they're using the same notes. Well, I mean, all music uses the same notes, but what you've got that very similar phrase. Now, part of me can see why they do that, because this is summer Eurobop. There are so many songs over the last 4 or 5 years in the European music scene where you can hear this rhythm, this style, this light, bouncy effervescence sitting on the top. And it's like, oh yeah, I can hear what you're trying to do with this. But that means that I knew so many far better examples. It's just like, yeah, you're now middle of the pack. And middle of the pack does not get people to pick up the phone. You need to be in the top 2 or 3 to get the votes. And it's the same with the juries. If you're just going to be in that middle lump of the juries, you're not going to get anything. It's, our distribution at the UK of points this wasn't a case of, oh, we got lots of 11th, 12th, 13th places. This was nobody voted. And there are a whole bundle of competitive issues. There are a whole bundle of structural issues in the contest itself. But at the end of the day, this was a song that had a lot of heart, but it just felt this is going to be great in the Mediterranean clubs. This is going to be great in the charts, but it's not going to pick up votes.
Same comment as France, basically. The UK can't.
Or United Kingdom, see France. Well done, Tobias.
Yeah, but I mean, the UK can't afford to be good enough because everyone expects so much more from you. I know this has been a difficult point to bring home, but all of Europe still thinks of the UK as the primer pop motor of Europe. We expect excellent quality from the UK, and when we don't get it, we're not going to. I mean, look at Poland this year. Poland can be a little bit crap and get away with it because we find it funny, but it won't be funny when it comes from the UK. It needs to be very slick and meet our expectations. I thought with May, I think the problem was that she was feeling a bit awkward on stage and was a little bit wobbly on some notes. You could be one or the other, but you can't be both. That's a problem. And, you know, it just didn't meet our expectations. I think we all liked it, just like Spain, you know, everyone's thinking, yeah, this is not too bad, but everyone had another favorites. So keep on, but step up the game for next year. More quality control.
Coming on the back of Sam was never going to be easy for anybody. And I guess with that, all of our expectations were so much higher than they had been in many years, because, you know, each time the UK entry comes out, it's like, oh, you know, we've got to tune into Radio 2, we're going to hear what this is. And it's, you know, that little modicum of, well, maybe, and then that kind of, as you kind of think about it, no, this is just isn't going to cut it. Then unfortunately, then you got to the contest and each and every time near the end, bottom, whatever it was. But then when you had a year like last year where you were second and where you then ended up hosting, everything was upped. And even though you need to kind of reset every year and it's not the same, you still had those high expectations. When I heard I Wrote a Song, I thought, I don't think this is good enough straight off when it's coming straight after Sam, as much as I tried not to think about Sam, because it just didn't feel like, you didn't get that sense again, that feeling. Can they do it a second year in a row? Yeah, granted, not the full team, but, you know, the TAP guys and then the BBC and then putting this. And I guess, you know, with Sam, it probably came as this whole package, and he had the ideas too, and they worked and collaborated. But maybe with May, it was more, there were, you know, people advising and guiding it. It just didn't really work out. But I hope the TAP do stay involved, because my biggest fear would be that it just starts to tank again, or that they get nice or adequate artists with okay songs, and then it just gradually continues to be 24th, 25th each and every year, because the audience are there and they're strong and they're going to keep watching Eurovision in the UK. But we as fans, we want to see the UK right up there and really competing. And so that's my hope, that it can, you know, continue, that this wasn't a blip. This is just another year and it didn't work, but on we go for 24.
I think I really agree with Tobias's point, though, that we definitely could have sent something better because we have better songwriters, better performers. And I will admit to being one of the people who was secretly hoping it was going to be Rina Sawayama this year, because she's the kind of quality we should be expecting now after Sam. Overall, the writing of I Wrote a Song was not the strongest that British songwriters have. It, you know, has a cliche Spanish guitar, which is now out of most sonic spheres, and this kind of pop writing that shouldn't be there anymore. It sounded to me personally quite dated. And when you've got innovative songwriters about, like the likes of Rina Sawayama, that show what it could have been like, it, you know, if we'd have sent Frankenstein or whatever, and that had been the song, it would have been a much stronger statement. So it's about really engaging with the quality of the writing that's happening, making sure good songwriters are being involved alongside these new and upcoming artists. I don't have a problem with someone like May Muller doing it over Rina, but you need a better quality of songwriter alongside the quality of artist doing innovative things that are going to be exciting. And I think that's going to be the thing that will drive it forward as well, not just focusing on who the artist is going to be.
I wrote a song. It's not even May Muller's best song that she's written. I heard a song that she was teasing that she's releasing later this year, and it's almost like Avril Lavigne-esque kind of Riot Girl pop, and it's great. And it would have been, you know, from what I heard in that teaser, I think it would have been a better option. But one of the things that kept, because I was never happy about the song that we were sending, and I always said, I don't see this doing well. It's not my. I was always saying it's not good enough, especially since what we sent last year. And everyone was like, you would have loved a song like this last year. No, I wouldn't. I would have said the same last year. And people saying, oh, it's you know, it's good for the UK. Good for the UK isn't good enough.
I think a lot of people weren't that keen on Spaceman when it first came out last year. Can you remember that quickly? So I think I still like the song. I still defend the song. I think to me, it sounded, in one of Dua Lipa, Mabel, Anne-Marie, it's sort of perfect, sort of, it's British, you know, up-tempo girly pop to me. And I felt it was very identifiably British, but to do well at Eurovision, it needed, you can't get away with having vocals not quite right, especially on like the jury note that she put on the end. You know, the whole thing was meant to be building up to that point, and it fell flat. And yeah, I think the execution was off. You know, I think you can make a lot of the same criticisms of Poland that we made of I Wrote a Song, but that was executed right. It had the best dance break in the contest, and yeah, that achieved a good result. So yeah, I still stand by the song, just not everything that came after, basically.
And finally, it broke one of the cardinal rules of Eurovision Song Contest staging, which is, of all the colours, of all the palettes in all the world, never choose the same palette as Mr. Blobby.
It's funny because obviously there's now so much conversation because we knew we were going internal and everyone knew we were choosing. I mean, no one knew, but we all knew that it was going to be a pop girl. And there was all these songs that people that found, because obviously Sam's was released before they announced it. So all the songs that people on Twitter and stuff were finding were amazing. Like the rumored artists, like I think like Cat Burns, like Birdie, there were several Rina Sawayama songs, and they were all better than like lots of you mean, they were all better than May's song. And it just shows we have as Euro fans, we have a really good grasp of what a good Eurovision song is. And I feel like, even though it's only 50%, but I feel like they need to also recognize what will do well with juries, because May's song wasn't very difficult to sing at all. I know they added the big note at the end, but even that, it wasn't very high. And also her nerves got the better of her. But if you think about Unicorn, which is another like pop girl song, those had some very difficult vocals, and she was dancing at the same time, and it just looks sleeker. It's just, yeah, I just think they need to think about the juries as well when choosing a song.
That's my sort of concern with, like, when we were talking earlier about let's send grime, let's send other genres, is the current state of the juries. I want people to take risks, and I want countries to send things that are interesting. But with the juries the way they are, is that going to be rewarded? And then are we going to, is the sort of reputation that we're really trying to pull back in the UK then going to start sinking because we're not being rewarded for trying something different?
It might happen like Blanca Paloma, right? If we send a grime track, will people outside of the UK truly understand it? Will they truly be able to engage with it in the same way? I don't know, because grime artists have to be at a particular level and pitch themselves in a very particular way to get success in Europe. And Stormzy is not really that grime anymore if you look at the roots of the music. So it would have to be something, you know, that would be more mainstreamed version of it to be able to communicate that.
or a metal track for that matter, which brings me nicely onto Germany, because I am slowly boiling to death in this office. Germany were represented by Lord of the Lost with Blood and Glitter, and they came a dead last. And Chris is shaking his head, so I'm going to assume you've got some thoughts on this.
So, firstly, I would like to thank Germany, because they did the best thing they could, which was not send Icke Hüftgold. So they did well there. So kudos to Germany. The thing is, Germany were just unlucky. I think they did really well, but they were not the only metal band on stage that evening. And Australia, I'm pretty certain, would have just dragged a lot more of the points away from them. But anyone who's going to vote for a metal song would have gone for either Finland, because they thought it had a chance, or given point, gone towards Australia, because Australia was kind of, I don't know how many hardcore metalheads watch Eurovision. I know there will be some, but people who are straight into metal music might lean towards who were watching Eurovision might lean towards the more pop tinged metal of Voyager. So I think they probably got a lot of the votes, and obviously I think the more poppiness lends itself to the juries better. But I think the juries should have been able to appreciate that Chris Harms was going from like a very baritone kind of I forget the name of the singer of a band, him, Vili Velo, kind of baritone vocals, and then going to a controlled scream at the flick of a switch. That is so hard to do. And again, I mentioned this when I talked about Spain. The juries don't know what they're talking about, is basically the long and short of it. I feel they don't have the knowledge to appreciate when something is so astonishingly good what they're doing. And if they're scoring on outstanding vocals, they should have awarded Lord of the Lost with more points.
But I think that's the problem. Is that I say this, I'm going to say this every week until I die, but they're not scoring, are they? They're ranking. And so actually, if you say, because you're not, I'd still say jury should be giving songs a grade out of 5 or 10 the minute the song is finished performing. And you can say, well, actually, I know nothing about metal, but I really enjoyed that. Whereas if you're ranking them, you just like, oh, the metal song. And, anyway, I say, I'm going to say this until Osterdal gets my emails. But
I hope he's aware.
He's definitely
and
aware.
we'll have more from Osterdal gets my emails later on the show. But now, Sparks. I think with Germany, the one thing I like was this was utter confidence from the band. There have been times in other national finals where a band or an artist who has a challenge, let's go with challenging genre. Goth metal is not mainstream. They didn't water down what they presented. Now, it is a little bit more accessible than their early material, but when you listen to the other singles that have come out from Lord of the Lost in the last month, you realize that their entire sound is the same sound as Blood and Glitter. So the band had complete confidence to be themselves. That's the first important thing for me. Secondly, their broadcaster had enough confidence to let them be themselves. Side note, we can talk about Romania, or let's just go see Romania and come back into this conversation with Germany. What I think Germany's big problem is, and they've not solved this, this has been Germany's problem for a long time, which is they just don't get the right people watching their national final. The people who and I've spoken with their head of delegation previously, although this would be 3 or 4 years back. The people watching their national final are much older and are not the people who watch the Eurovision Song Contest. So their public vote has nothing to do with Eurovision. So there isn't a correlation. And then they have this strange thing about we're going to open the votes for a week over the various radio stations. That's great public service broadcasting, by the way. That lets new bands get themselves known, get themselves out there. That's wonderful. But it's useless for picking a competitive entry. So I think Germany has 2 choices here. One of them is to radically overhaul the national final system to reflect the song contest and do it that way. I think that's the easier solution, but I think that's the wrong one. I think Germany needs to continue confidence. And what I would say to Germany is go for an internal selection next year. Go for another metal, rock, goth, industrial, whatever band.
Electric Cowboy.
That would do fine as well. But what you've done is Lord of the Lost has shown that they can be honest on stage. And that the broadcaster trusts them to do that. Now you bring in another band. Everybody can insert their favorite Eskimo cowboy in here, but there are others. And give them the exact same confidence to be themselves, to not water themselves down, and to back up their decisions. And just become the country that sends rock music. Because are you going to get for the win occasionally just sending bland middle of the road and you get lucky with a Ronan Keating-esque song? Yeah, but, you know, Denmark do that. Germany used to do that. Belgium do that. It's just like, no, be the country that sends rock. Have all of it, because you know, Germany sent the first rock and roll song to the Eurovision Song Contest back in 1956. You've got the form. You sent 2 of them now. Keep on doing that. Build up your rep inside those circles. Let those bands know that it is safe. You will find success. You will find streaming success. You will find commercial success. You will find confidence, and the genre will come to you. Germany, specialize. It failed this year. It wasn't perfect. I would just say lock in and keep passing off that confidence next year.
Right. You said that Germany has 2 choices. I say that Germany has 1 choice. They need to get rid of absolutely everyone who is involved in making the Eurovision Song Contest on German television, because they obviously don't have the faintest idea what they're doing. They obviously don't have the faintest idea what works at Eurovision. This run of placings that they've had for the last 10 years, it is super embarrassing. They are the biggest music industry in Europe. How are they this useless? They should be able to pick something at least slightly competitive in their sleep. I have nothing but the lowest regard for the people in charge of Eurovision in Germany. So tell us what you really think. Blunt? Am I being blunt here? But I mean, nothing they've done don't know lately.
Only if I can be Philby.
I mean, they are okay. They had more confidence this year. They almost got it right. For a moment, I thought that Lord of the Lost would do pretty well, but then in the end, the song never. I mean, just like Spain, the song was too weak. It didn't go anywhere. It would have, those vocals and that package, but with the song that would have been strong enough, that could have been something. But their whole national final contest with all these bland things, songs and singers that don't mean anything to anyone, that will never bring you success. Okay, 2018, that was a shot in the dark and it worked, but do something about it and kick everyone out and have a completely new team. They can't do worse. Let it burn and start over.
I think there was a mutual friend of mine and Sam's told me that she got an email from German television saying, if anyone knows any acts who are good on TikTok who might want to take part, then get in touch. So they were sort of, Sam, did you get that? Or you obviously know who I'm talking about, but
yeah, there was so I kind of know what you mean, because they did open it up for, like, you could submit an entry via TikTok, which is where Passy Gurdy came from. And I think she got involved in the selection because she blew up on TikTok with Melodies of Hope. But then they also had that wild card where Iki came from, where they were from TikTok down to a final 6 and you could vote from there. So that they were really, it's almost like they saw the UK success from getting this quote unquote TikTok star in Sam Ryder. That's what we need to do. Let's really lean into that. Didn't work. I quite like the fact that Germany weren't beige this year. And I think that's what they need to keep doing. They need to keep pushing out of this mediocrity of like Lavina, Malik Harris, just nothingness, white bread songs that completely wash over you and you forget them the second they happened. Lord of the Lost didn't work for whatever reason. I think it's because they had Ukraine, which is just, you know, quite out there R&B song. Then you've got Alessandra, the big TikTok pop song. And then 2 songs later, you've got Noah Carell. They were completely pinned in. And then you've got this, as we said, you had Australia and Slovenia in that sort of subgenre that was a bit stronger than them and more accessible. They were just unlucky. Germany, you just need to keep trying. And as you know, Tobias said, you've got the most diverse and biggest music industry in Europe. Your national finals showcase that. You have, you know, it's a case of what could have been, because I think if she wasn't ill, Frida Gold would have been a phenomenal choice. A ballad in German, that could have really stood out because she actually made German sound pleasant, which is a difficult thing to do. They need to keep experimenting. They need to keep trying. And like as Tobias said, you can't get much worse than what you're currently doing. Michael Schulte was a shot in the dark, and it worked. But then they went back to this national final for Sisters, which was, let's be honest, rigged for Sisters to win. And it didn't work. Like that song was never going to work. And so I'm kind of in agreement with Tobias. Like they seem to have this internal selection formulated around a national final. They know who they want, they know how they're going to get it, and they kind of waste everyone else's time. If you know who you want to send, just send them, but make sure it stands out, it has impact, and it's true to you. You tried it this year, it didn't work, but keep going. Whether it's we go back to some sort of pop, which German pop, which they do well, do it. You go more techno, which Germany do very well, do it. Sod it. Send like a Nightclub Berlin song. That would be fucking fabulous and different on Eurovision. It'd be a fever dream, but I would love it and people would remember it.
The amount of rap that's in the German charts, the amount of rap and spoken word and challenging stuff, you know, everybody who's watching this, go and listen to the top 10 of the German charts right now. And then go back and listen to the national final songs. And you realize Germany is just completely ignoring what the German public like. If Germany is not going to buy it, if you're not going to get your own song charting, you're doing something wrong. Look at the charts for the populist songs. And those songs are intricate, they're detailed, they're life stories, they're emotional, they're powerful, they're roller coasting. Most of the time they have the explicit tag in Spotify. So you might need to just tone down in the selections. But Germany has so much potential and none of it ever shines through. I mean, I've leaned into their saying, go with the rock music. Go, you know, you've got a long history there of industrial and everything coming through. But Tobias, yep, you're right. Those who are doing the broadcast, who are doing the selection, just don't know where to turn to next. I think Lord of the Lost had so much in themselves on stage because the delegation probably went, yes, okay, try that, okay.
Well, they're a rock band. They know their image. They're like, we'll do this. That's our thing.
Imagine if Germany had opened, Chris, because this is a concert opening number. Imagine if they had opened instead of Austria. I don't think they would be as low a placing as they have.
Would have been a great opening. I mean, I mentioned to you before, like, you know, when you say about rock, I am fully team Electric Callboy, just because what they do is mash that metal rock with that Berghain kind of techno vibe. It just feels so German whilst being sung. I think all their songs are in English. It's accessible for people outside Germany. That's why I am a latecomer to them. I only found out about them only a couple of months ago, really. And yeah, I think that'd be a great choice for Germany, or something in that vein that really captures that Berlin nightclub scene and vibe.
I must say. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think the issue as well is they're obsessed with songwriting camps, because look at the names of their songs in national finals this year. You've got British names there, you've got Elsie Bay there. They're obsessed with songwriting camps and Eurovision songs. Even Lord of the Lost, they hired people in to help write that with Chris, and I think that's their issue.
I will say, I don't think it's fully their fault, because this is another argument with the whole, are the juries actually following their criteria? It should have done a lot better. If the juries followed their criteria, it should have done a lot better. It was a very, national final aside, if we just say it was an internal selection, it was a very sleek performance. They're very experienced performers. It looked great. And also, I've seen a lot of vocal coaches react to it, and they said, I can't remember his name, the lead singer, what he's doing is very difficult technically, and a lot of music experts would know that, but I think they just heard, oh my god, there's this like heavy metal element, and they just completely switched off. And this is where the juries are completely unpredictable, because obviously you could argue that Cardia did that, but they rewarded him. And so now I think, and I was going to mention it before, I think the juries are so unpredictable, and I think they do have a slight bias in knowing what are fan favorites. So I think that played into it. But either way, I think Germany, I still think they sent a really great entry. I think the issue is, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, is that it was a very strong year song-wise. And because a lot of these songs were very solid, I think they kind of merge into one, and people forget like about the songs individually. I think it was a very strong song. I don't think any of the songs were really like that bad. And it really sucks that it came last. But I think the juries at least should have rewarded it, because technically it was very, very well done, and they didn't pay it dust.
Yeah, I think that's the great shame with the current jury system, is that you're trying to rank, pop versus metal versus jazz. I mean, there's rarely jazz at Eurovision, but it's how do you rank? It's a bit like a talent show. How do you decide what's better between a magician and a juggler? That's
the magician.
Yeah, it's the magician, Andrew.
Why do you keep calling me Andrew?
I don't know. You look like an Andrew. Sorry.
I mean, it's literally like there. So I think that's sort of. I think the other thing with Germany, I think they've had, because obviously their record in Eurovision overall is actually not all that brilliant. They've won twice, and I think we've got to be honest. Satellite would not do very well in modern Eurovision. It would be that sort of quirky pop song that would come sort of about 18th. It's only because, and I think it's because Germany just haven't sort of modernized quite enough to what's going on in the contest these days.
Then they could just send something like Labra Spanda from like 2013 or something, which nearly went to Eurovision.
Absolute robbery. What a great song.
That would have been a great entry.
It'd just be go through the German sort of selections. I'd just be reminded of absolute gold that's been in those.
Who was the actor who did the performance on exercise bikes? Because I want them to come back, because that was fabulous.
That was the one I was thinking of. So good.
Send them.
But then they managed to scare everyone interesting off of their national final, because there was no point in entering anymore. My big hope for Germany, actually, for next year, spells Luxembourg, because Luxembourg is coming back. RTL Group is one of the biggest broadcasters in Europe, with, branches in many, many countries. Will they go Luxembourg as in local Luxembourg, or will they go RTL Group Luxembourg? Imagine if they would get a hot German acts, right off the charts. That would do brilliantly next year. That would do top 5. I mean, wouldn't that be a slap on the face for German television? Go in and show them how it's done. Tap into all that talent that is going on in Germany, and show them that it could work. That would be fantastic.
I'm curious, what do people think about that discourse that went around for a while, that Germany was robbed of its Ben Dolich moment? Do people think Ben Dolich actually would have had that effect or not? Because I know some people seem to be really super into that theory, but I don't know whether that song actually would have done anything.
No.
Was that the theory where Ben Dolich would finish 24th, not 25th, 26th, or 27th?
Yeah, we heard the live vocal on that show he did in Germany, and considering he couldn't hit the high note and he did struggle, stood still. I think that would have been one of those fan wanks which on paper would have done amazingly, and then crash and burn live. So no, I don't think it would have propel Germany anywhere. Like I said, they got third with Marco Schulze and they've dropped straight back down again. So I don't know. Germany, you're an enigma.
It was a great single, though. It was a great song. I loved it.
You know what, Germany? Send Ike Hufgold next year. Let's just see what happens. Shits and giggles.
Or perhaps not. No, Germany, don't do that.
We don't need the German Ali G. We don't, and that's all he looked like at the national final in his gold tracksuit. I'm sorry.
What's Stefan Raab doing these days?
Oh God!
Hey,
send Anka. Screw it. Send her.
Hey, when he was in charge, he brought Lena. So
I was going to go Pete Camp and go Helen Fisher. So
or Barbara. Screw it. She'll just
Barbara. Yes.
If she's not too busy flirting with Vidas again. Anyway.
So the last thing I wanted to, because we've gone through all 5 songs, is briefly, let's talk about, is the Big Five still a justifiable thing? We've had 2 songs do badly this year, 2 songs come middle of the road, and 1 song do okay. I think last year there was a feeling that the Big Five was going to have this massive renaissance because of how UK and Spain did, but can we justify still getting this sort of berth straight into the final if we're performing the way we are?
No.
Yes.
I'd argue yes, because it's not for lack of trying this year. All 5 countries sent credible songs. I think, to make it fairer, their whole performance should be shown in the semi-final, not just a clip and then you go find it later on YouTube. Show the whole performance instead of having an interval act. Have those 3 perform on the Tuesday and Thursday night, because you're at a disadvantage. You haven't seen the full song, whereas in the semi-final, you know who you're going to vote for because you saw it 2 nights before.
I'd actually disagree there, because I think that even if they were the interval act, people know that this is the interval act. We've had the songs, we have the televote open. Now let's go refill the snacks and the drinks. My boring answer is always that yes, if that is what is needed to secure the budget to have the Eurovision Song Contest, and that is what the Big Five countries demand, fine, let them be straight into the final, but they're not doing themselves any favors. I think it would be better for all the Big Five, well, Italy's doing well anyway, but it would be better for them to have that semi-final sweats and maybe be thrown out once in a while, because then they would just have to shape up, which would be nice.
I really want
there's a terrible balance here between the competitive side of Eurovision and the sort of technical, how it all works. The Big Five have to stay partly because of budget. And if they're not on the Saturday night, why are they contributing so much budget to the contest? They contribute more of the budget to the EBU as a whole. They are primary members. If you take them out of the running, if you drop their thing, then everybody's going to have to pay a little bit more. So you can't afford to lose them. But most importantly, they provide the viewing figures. And they guarantee viewing figures on Saturday night. Without those viewing figures and those headline numbers, you don't have as big a show as you have. You don't get the sponsors coming in. You don't get the music industry paying in as well. And also, part of the song contest is this is a big live event that the EBU can use for its members as a learning opportunity. Yes, we love the songs. We love the competitive side of things, but Eurovision is a lot more for broadcasters. And the Big Five need to be there for that side of the event to happen. They need to be there for the budgetary reasons. They need to be there for viewing figure reasons. They need to be there for the EBU's internal processes as well. And, they get straight through the final. Great. For some, that's an advantage. But also, they don't have that run-up. They don't have that people being familiar with them through the semi-finals. So there's a disadvantage as well. So competitively, I think it does balance out. Yep, you get a bye straight through, but you're not going to be battle-tested when you get through to Saturday night. If we don't have a Big Five, we have a radically different contest. We have a smaller contest. And if we want that, then we say goodbye to the Big Five. If we want Eurovision to stay where it is and keep growing, then the Big Five is a necessary choice.
I mean, I can't speak for the other countries in the Big Five, but I feel like the UK, if they got knocked out in the semi-final, it would not have a positive effect. It would not be the kick up the arse, because we would go, oh, we didn't get into the final because nobody voted for us. Or people watch on a Saturday not even realizing that we've not qualified. Because I mean, the common thing we heard this year was, hang on, there's semi-finals. So, you know, because they've normally been shunted to BBC 3 or 4. So I'm not sure that us crashing out in a semi-final is the big kick up the arse we think it would be. I think the media and public would react even more negatively to it.
I can't see BBC leaving though. Are any of the Big Five really realistically going to walk away from the contest?
No, I can't see them leaving, but I just don't think it's going to make them go, shit, we'll try harder next year. You know,
I think they wouldn't leave, but I think they would certainly not put as much effort into it. I think Eurovision, the attendance at Eurovision is one of those sort of conditions for a bigger broadcaster. If you also get like, if you're getting the Olympic rights and the World Cup rights through the EBU, there's a sort of nudge and wink of, you're going to enter Eurovision, aren't you? Much like last year's winner, next year's host turns up at Junior Eurovision as well. Let's see if Sweden returns for that this year. But there's a difference between turning up and there's a difference between putting in the effort. And I think if you did not have the Big Five going through and you could accept those changes for a smaller contest, the BBC just might go, yeah, okay, right, well, we're just going to turn up with Jake and Joe. Okay, there you go. We're not going to put any effort into it. We're not going to put it over all the channels. We're not going to give you a Eurovision cast. We will put in minimum viable effort into the EBU. There you go.
I don't think that's likely. I think Eurovision is so built into our culture. People love Eurovision in this country. I don't think you might have lower viewing figures if you don't make it to the final, but you probably have higher viewing figures in semis. My main thing is I want my moment of cheering when the UK qualifies to the final. The experience as a viewer from a Big Five country is that you turn up to the final. If you get a good mid-table finish, so what? You still lose. But every other country, if you get mid-table finish, you get a moment of pure euphoria when you qualify for the final. You're already a winner by the time you get to the finals. And we still qualify, you know, maybe not every year, but there was a while we were doing it every other year in terms of our final position. So that's what I want. And I think if it gives you something to say you've done well as well. So I don't think there's, even though there is sometimes when you lose, there's sometimes when it's good.
Cool. Right. Let's leave it there. Jesus, it's been over 2 hours. Jesus. Thank you all once again for joining in this week, and thanks for giving us 2 hours of discussion on 5 songs.